need to wear a mask. Now, as that earlier soundbite from Dr. Colfax mentioned, there are some very limited exemptions, and that does apply here in Marin County as well. And it's really some select settings where there are stable cohorts. And what we mean by that is the same group of people day in, day out, such as your coworkers that you work with every day. If they are fully vaccinated and that setting can also meet some other criteria, then those may be some areas in which you can go without a mask. But really, when you get to the heart of it, many Marin counties will not interact with these few settings that are allowed to go without. So therefore, they're not going to experience that exemption. So again, at the end of the day, the take-home message is, at least through January 15th, when we're in most public settings, take that mask with you and be prepared to wear it if a business has posted signage asking you to do so.
All right, so really you're going back to what you had before November 2nd. And really, it really hasn't been that different in the last month anyway without the mask mandate, because most people in Marin County just wear that mask in public settings indoors anyway. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not going to be a radical change for most, because like you just said, we've been really pleased to see that the majority of our community continues to wear a mask when they go into their neighborhood grocery store or their local restaurant. So for some, yes, it will be an adjustment, but I think our community understands the value of a mask as a tool that can help prevent spread. And so it should not be a big adjustment for most to have to implement this new mask mandate today.
Okay, but did you technically have to even apply for an exemption, or was it not even that formal where the state just said, hey, your old policy looks good to us, just do that? Is that how it played out?
Right. Yeah, there was no petitioning or invitation. The state of California clarified its guidance that was initially issued on the 13th on Monday, and basically saying to any county in California that has an existing or you could say recent, in the case of Marin County, indoor mask mandate criteria, that then that county basically has a choice. They can go ahead and default to the state's prescribed guidelines, or in the case of Marin, San Francisco, Contra Costa, and others, default to what they have locally. So there's not a big adjustment. So it was sort of a qualification. We just didn't find out until late last night.
But this is what's interesting to me, is that your policy seems less strict in that it offers a few places where you can be exempt from mask wearing than the state policy. And before, we were always told the stricter rule applies when you're looking at the state and county and any discrepancies.
I think, I can't speak for the state, but recognizing the immense progress that Bay Area counties have made against COVID-19, not only in keeping our case rates and hospitalization rates lower than other areas of California, but we also have some of the highest vaccination rates in California and across the United States for that matter. So in that fact, I want to believe that the state chose to pursue that option because they recognize the great work that not only these local jurisdictions, but most importantly, the residents within those areas, the important work that has been done there by our whole Bay Area community.
All right, so let's talk about that. Is Marin County seeing a noticeable increase in cases right now, as so many counties are? And what about hospitalizations?
We have seen a slight increase in cases here in Marin County as we look to the CDC Community Transmission Tracker, which is a metric that many people use these days. We tend to be going back and forth between the high and substantial categories. That's that red and orange categories. That is to be expected this time of year as the weather's colder. It's the holidays, so people are staying indoors more, or they're wanting to gather. So we did anticipate an uptick in cases. The good news is we're not seeing a considerable increase in hospitalizations, and that's really a metric that we're keeping an eye on. We recognize that we're in a different place than we were this time last year, namely because we have access to a virus-preventing vaccine, and that really has been hugely effective for our Bay Area. Yes, there is a possibility, if you're fully vaccinated, of getting COVID-19, but then your symptoms are dramatically less. And we've seen a big decrease in hospitalizations and a decrease in adverse outcomes. So what this means is yes, while there's an uptick in cases, unless we see a surge in hospitalizations locally, we know that the vaccine is doing what it's supposed to do, which is lessen those severe side effects. Of course, we're going to keep a very close eye on those case rates and those hospitalization rates as we're still learning more about Omicron. And here in Marin County, the majority of our cases are still driven by the Delta variant. So, while we're not necessarily out of the woods, we're very pleased with where we are right now.
How many hospitalized right now? Because I remember last time I talked to Dr. Matt Willis, it was like if you got to 13 hospitalized, you were going to bring back the indoor mask mandate anyway. What are you at?
I don't have the data in front of me, but I recall from yesterday's report that we had 6 total in the hospital for Marin County. So that's, just under halfway there to that mark. So we're hoping that we can stay below that 13 mark.
Okay. I want to ask you, how's it going with your request to have folks who take at-home tests upload the results and report it to the county?
We're really pleased with the response so far. I mean, it is a voluntary action.
Yeah.
But people are going to coronavirus.marinhhs.org/self-test reporting. That is a wonderful mechanism for people to simply tell us the result, whether it's negative, positive, or inconclusive even, of their recent test, and most importantly, why they're testing, if they're symptomatic or if they're traveling. And if anybody watching missed that earlier conversation with Dr. Willis, the real reason we want to do this is test results are our eyes on the virus. And so when you get your PCR test at a medical provider or otherwise, laboratories report those results to us. And that helps us understand where cases are and if there's a potential outbreak and so forth. But with the home test, we simply don't have those eyes. And so this reporting form is an opportunity for us to, again, see what is happening in our community, if there's any areas of concerns and outbreaks. And most importantly, if somebody needs help with isolation or quarantine, we can provide those helpful services.
All right, Lainey, I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to ask you, how are you trying to ensure safety and prevent outbreaks when students come back to school after the holiday break?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you asked this question because we have this new partnership. Well, actually, it's an existing partnership, but a new program, I should say, with Marin County Office of Education, as well as all of our schools. We just distributed, or in the process of distributing, close to 40,000 test kits. So every single student will have access to a test kit. And the purpose of this at-home test kit is so when families are preparing to come back to school after the holidays, every student can be tested and then, of course, report those results through that self-test reporting mechanism so that we understand from the get-go where we may have some positive cases and help ensure safety after, again, this holiday season. A lot of people are mingling, a lot of people are traveling. So that's why testing remains really crucial this time of year.
All right, Lainey Hendricks, that's great to hear. Marin County's Public Health Information Officer. There I go, saying health again. I cannot help it. That's what we're all focused on, Public Information Officer. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise, take care.
All right, coming up next, are people really moving out of California instead of coming to the state? Plus, a critical local school budget vote and what happens now. We'll be right back.
In commercial break.
All right, everybody, it looks like our producer has produced a commercial break question. No. Okay, well then go ahead and enjoy this lovely picture before the rain comes back to the Bay Area. You can see those dark clouds forming right now. Here's your moment of zen. We'll be right back. I don't even know if we're on Facebook right now. I don't see the feed.
5 seconds. 4, 3,
I don't see it.
2, 1.
ABC7 is partnering with the brand new San Francisco Standard to showcase some of their deep and insightful reporting on the city. Our news organizations share the mission of building a better Bay Area. And one important piece of that is to tell the stories, the successes and struggles of all our diverse communities. And that includes education. Joining us now to talk about a controversial and important school budget vote last night is San Francisco Standard reporter Sarah Wright. Sarah, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, that was a high-profile meeting because the school board had to vote on a budget for the coming year, looking at a $125 million projected deficit. So we knew it was going to be painful. It's just how you distribute that pain, I guess, right? So what did they decide?
Yeah, so last night, as you said, they had this consequential decision facing a $125 million budget deficit. The state was actually threatening to come in and take over if they weren't able to pass a plan in order to prove that they're willing to make cuts to plug that budget hole. And so last night in a 6-1 vote, the Board of Education decided that they're willing to take the staff recommendations and make $90 million of cuts. Most of those cuts are going to come from staffing.
Most, or is it, did I read 50 million from schools, right, the sites,
yes,
and then 40 million from kind of headquarters staff?
Precisely. So
that leaves a $35 million hole, no?
It does, but that $35 million actually comes from a combination of grants and some other money that comes from the rainy day fund. Now, school districts do have rainy day funds, and that's what they're intended for, is to make up these types of gaps. But that money is one-time money. It's not sustainable.
Got it. Okay, so Sarah, of the 50 million that will come from the school sites, what does that mean? Does that mean, for example, fewer teachers? Does that mean closing some programs or maybe even schools? What are the options on the table?
So the options on the table are really focusing in on staffs. The majority of the district's budget comes from paying for teachers, for staff, for all of those sort of costs. And so this budget really targeted what do school sites need at a very basic level. They need nurses, they need librarians, they need principals, but any staff that's sort of not in that core group of service members is up for cuts now. And many of those positions, I was told by the budget staff, remain unfilled. And so it's not necessarily going to mean teachers losing their jobs at this point, but it means that classrooms and school sites that are understaffed may stay that way.
Oh, okay. Sarah, I think it's also important to explain to our viewers how they got into this deep hole in the first place, right? This $125 million short.
Absolutely. So this is a theme that's happening all across California, and it comes from declining enrollment. Since 2019, the San Francisco Unified School District has seen a 6.5% loss of students. And so when the state is deciding who to give money to, which schools need more money, they use a formula that's based on student enrollment. And so when you have that steep of a decline, you're gonna lose money. And San Francisco Unified, like many other districts, still needs to spend money. They still need to keep the lights on. And so they're really struggling to balance their books this year and in the coming years.
Sarah, why do we think enrollment has dropped so much in San Francisco? Now, I get that a lot of people moved out of the big cities, but San Francisco more so, like a higher percentage. I wish there were just exit interviews with families so they really can get at the heart of it. There aren't, but what do we think?
It really depends on who you ask. Some people will say that in general, California is just seeing, fewer kids. And our population demographics reflect that. Other people will say there's something unique about this city. Kids are moving to private schools, or kids are moving out of the city. Families are moving out of the city. And thus, schools aren't as populated anymore. And that is true. I mean, San Francisco has more than 130 schools to serve more than 50,000 students. And they have one of, the smallest amount of students per site among similar districts in the state.
All right. So, Sarah, what is the next step, in the coming months? And is there still a chance to reverse this?
So there's not a chance to reverse it, but there is a chance to get more specific. And so as the governor releases more details about his plan in January and then in May, the school district will be refining their budget plan and getting more focused on where these cuts specifically are going to come from, which school district sites are going to see the most severe cuts, what sort of infrastructure is going to change. And I do want to back up for a moment and just explain that the reason why these decisions are so difficult is because San Francisco Unified is the only district in the whole state that serves as both a school district and also a county office of education. So they're not just making school site decisions, they're making broader policy decisions and have staff that's focused on COVID-19 protocols, how special education programs are run, and other large decisions.
Oh, interesting. Sarah, right, this is a very complicated issue, but thanks for breaking that down to, bite sizes for us that we can understand. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we do have links to the San Francisco Standard's other original reporting on our website, abc7news.com. And to watch more of their videos, just check out our ABC7 Bay Area streaming TV app. We've heard isolated stories of people fed up and moving out of California, but is that really the case? What's the larger impact here? We'll dive into that next. Are we streaming? Because I'm not seeing the feed on my Facebook page. We're still streaming on, okay. Should we turn my mic off? Thanks. We have breaking news right now in North Richmond. Sky 7 is over the scene of a shooting at Market and Truman Streets. One person has been transported to the hospital. There is a large police presence, as you can see. San Pablo police vehicles at the scene as well. Definitely stay out of the area if you can. We'll have much more ahead on ABC 7 News at 4. Our final segment today, you've probably been hearing lots of stories about Californians leaving the Golden State for greener pastures, tired of crime, high prices, and restrictions. But is that narrative really true? In March, a high-profile report by the nonpartisan research group at UC Berkeley found the answer wasn't so simple. The same group is out today with a follow-up report, and it too is just as fascinating. Joining us now is the executive director of the California Policy Lab, Evan White. Evan, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me on.
Before we jump into today's report, summarize really quickly what you found back in March that got so much attention. It was people were leaving the Bay Area, but not necessarily California, right?
That's right. Yeah, we didn't see any evidence of a Cal exodus from the rest of the state, but we did see an uptick in exits from the Bay Area. That was back in March.
Okay.
And that was using data through December of last year. We now have data through September of this year.
And what does that show? I think the picture is a little bit different. And as we pull up a map from your own website with the counties and the, California state there, tell us what you're finding now.
Yeah, so the big story now in terms of who's moving into the state and who's moving out of the state is that far fewer people are entering California. We saw about a 38% drop in entrances to the state from other states in the union. So people seem to be focusing on Cal exits, when in fact we're seeing a much bigger shift since the start of the pandemic on what you might call Cal entrances. This trend is statewide in nature. We're seeing it in all 9 of the regions in California, but it is more pronounced in the Bay Area. So we're seeing that out-of-state entrances to the Bay Area dropped by 45%.
Yeah, if we can just pull that map back up, because I think the colors are telling, right? It seems like to me that the Bay Area and the coastal area generally have a larger percentage of people leaving, or at least people not moving in. Whereas, are there some counties here that are seeing more people coming in than leaving, so a net gain? A few counties?
Yeah, what you're looking at here is that the share of movers, the change in the share of movers who leave the state. So it's actually sort of complicated. So if you're a mover and decide to leave the state, this is showing the change in the share of folks who are moving who leave the state. So what we're seeing here is that in San Francisco, San Mateo, Sonoma County, Marin County, a much larger share of people who are moving are leaving the state than before the pandemic.
I gotcha.
So everywhere that's red, you're seeing increases in the percentage of like what we call the leave rate among movers.
So are we seeing the dark blue areas? That's where you have more people moving in than moving out?
No, this map doesn't actually show you anything about entrances. It's just showing you the percentage of movers who leave the state. So in those blue counties, the percentage of movers that leave the state has actually gone down since the pandemic began.
Okay.
It means that they're moving to other parts of the state.
Look, I know you're looking at this data and not necessarily doing exit interviews, but any idea what's driving these choices?
Yeah, it's a great question. And unfortunately, the report itself tells us the what of what's happening, but not necessarily the why. There's certainly been a lot of speculation about the reasons for this, whether they're pandemic-related reasons, like a shift towards remote work that allows people to live, anywhere in the country. There are other sort of longer-term trends that people have cited, wildfires or economic conditions, taxes, or high housing prices. But we really don't get into that in this particular report. And most of that, I think at this point is mostly speculation. We hope to get into that in subsequent reports and try and put some data on those questions.
All right. Evan, why is this information important?
Yeah, I mean, at its heart, I think population matters in a number of ways. We saw that this year with the census. That meant that California lost one of its seats in the House of Representatives. It also has impacts on federal funding formulas. It also has potential impacts on tax revenues in the state. People leaving could impact housing prices if demand for housing goes down. That could actually be, in some areas, a good thing. Early in the pandemic, you saw rents in San Francisco going down, although that's stalled out a bit. It could also impact the labor market or other parts of the economy. I think people are really fascinated with this issue in part because it's about their perception of where they live. And if they think a lot of people are leaving, they sort of ask themselves the question, well, should I be leaving too? And so I think that's part of the fascination with the issue.
Right. That is interesting. Evan White, Executive Director of the California Policy Lab, thank you so much for a fascinating look at your new report on the comings and goings of the Golden State. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having me
We'll
on.
be right back. And Evan, if you don't have to go away just yet, do you have a couple more minutes?
Sure.
We are done with our on-air portion. However, we're still streaming, I believe, on YouTube, and it would be fabulous just because I have a couple more questions. And that is this trend, I guess this differential of people coming in versus people going out, has that been unfavorable for California for a few years now, even before the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of domestic migration, just in terms of people moving in and out of the state, California has been losing people to domestic migration for several years. I think 1.3 million people over the last decade. So that's been ongoing. What we saw at the beginning of the pandemic is a change in the rate. So as compared to the beginning of the pandemic, we're now losing more than double the amount of people to net domestic migration. And when I say net, I just mean the number of entrances minus the number of exits, right?
The difference there, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a long-term trend, sort of slowly, but it's really accelerated during the pandemic.
Okay, and I guess this gets into policy, and maybe it's not for you or I to decide or weigh in on, but I do wonder, you know, we put it in the framework of this is a loss, net loss for California, with the implication that we always want to attract more people to California. I wonder if there are some who say, hey, that's okay because this means more housing or more land or more whatever, or less congested freeways. If some people did leave, more people left than came in.
I do think it's a mixed bag. I think that policymakers do seem very, very concerned with people leaving the state. But I do think for people who live here, it is somewhat of a mixed bag. I think that California probably needs to do a little bit better of a job sort of marketing itself to out-of-state residents.
Yeah.
Cut through some of the narrative that prominent figures like Elon Musk has put forward in
Evan, we are
making
so
a big
out of
show of
time,
leaving.
but we ended on Elon Musk. I appreciate it. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and online answering your questions. Have a great day.